This was originally written as an internal tool for my team. And the real driver behind the internal tool was to reduce the amount of portals that we have to log into to correlate or to drive information for a client. So for example, you have portal.azure, you have admin.microsoft, you have Intune. I'll probably turn my phone off. You have all these different portals that you have to go to. And sometimes you just want to view information. And a lot of times when you're viewing information, you still have to PIM up or VPN in, as an example, if you're going to Active Directory or something. There's some kind of hoop you have to jump through. So the real driver for this solution was internally for our 30,000 clients that we manage, was being able to reduce the amount of portal hopping that we have. And so we ended up seeing a tremendous amount of value in being able to offer this to people that weren't necessarily managed by us to help with the same kind of pieces. So I'll kind of cover these blades as we go through. And if there's something you guys want to dive deeper into as we're going through it, just stop me and let me know. We'll have a conversation about it, okay? So
30,000 endpoints, not clients.
yeah, 30,000.
Okay.
Did I say clients?
Yeah.
Oh, those terms in my head are pretty interchangeable.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Wishful thinking from a sales perspective. We'll get that.
Exactly.
So a couple things to note that not all the blades are lit up on this demo tenant, and I'll go into my lab environment as long as there's no judging. We'll take a look at that and we'll look at the actual environment. But some pieces that are kind of interesting here is that this is a multi-tenant application hosted in my Azure behind an Azure web gateway. So I've got all the IP filtering and security pieces in place, and we did have it third-party pen tested to ensure nobody could get anywhere. It all runs off an app registration that's in your tenant, and it's all read-only permissions. The other thing about it is it draws real time. So when you disable a user and you go refresh the screen, it'll show disabled and your user accounts and everything will go down. So there's no waiting for it. And I find that just having the single pane of glass is pretty valuable. So on the overview screen, we start with, and the navigation kind of works from the top over here. So as you turn on things, more things come into play, like the SharePoint, OneDrive, Azure pieces are not in this tenant. They are in my lab tenant, so I'll show those when we get there. But it starts with these summary statistics, and these cards, they just kind of give us an overview of the environment. So how many Entra ID active users do we have? How many active guests? How many devices? How many Intune managed devices? What's your Microsoft Secure score? How many Entra ID app registrations? How many app registrations with expired secrets, meaning that they're not going to work? And how many are expiring in the next 30 days? So that's one of those key points that whenever you set up SSO with some kind of application that's tied to your Entra environment, if that secret expires, this app will no longer work and it affects end users. So we're trying to get ahead of that. And you'll see a lot of that built in the product here. The next thing we look at is kind of the Entra ID license. So there's Entra ID P free, P1, P2. And that dictates kind of what kind of information you're going to get out of all the APIs. So it's a really helpful thing. And then if you're syncing from an Active Directory on-prem, which most people are, we want to know the last time that it's synced, and just getting a quick view of that rather than going to the AD Connect server, the Entra ID Connect server helps out quite a bit. This environment has Active Directory on-premise and Config Manager in it. And so if those are of interest, I'll touch on them. If not, I'll skip over them. Anytime you're managing a SaaS environment or using SaaS environments, and I know you guys have an AWS exposure too, right? Quite a bit in AWS, is that correct?
Yeah, there's about 75 workstations out there.
So what's interesting to me is I would love to take your portal and connect it to AWS's API so you get a clear view of your entire environment. Right now, this is all hooked into Azure because that's really all the resources that I have exposure to in my environments to do all my development on. But if there's an API and I can pull the information, this is pretty extensible. But anytime you're working in a SaaS cloud environment, the services may go down. And when the services go down, it's really hard to discern, is there an actual issue with the endpoint or is it actually with the service itself? And so in the Microsoft landscape, they publish what are called Microsoft advisories and incidents that pertain to just your tenant. And when they publish those, you can find them in admin.microsoft, and you drill down a couple of blades, And you can get things like what's going on with Teams, what's going on with Exchange, SharePoint Online, M365 apps. And so what I did was I just exposed them in a better view, and it updates in real time. So as an issue comes out, if you hit this refresh key right here, it's going to pull the latest issues that are in your environment and if they were resolved or not. Down here below, I create a table that you can filter by service, by classification, or if it's resolved or not. So you can look at the ones that happened. If there was an outage and a bunch of people were complaining, you can go back in time if they resolved it before you saw it and see it. Down at the bottom, it's just got a little bit of information here about your tenant. And then here's all of the data sources that I have available. You can see Acronis and AI and Halo and the other AI piece, which I'll get to the AI components when I get to the lab. They're turned off currently in this demo environment. And then you have reporting components. So users, licenses, config profiles. You can see some of them like SOPs and Acronis and SharePoint are off. I wrote a Acronis integration for one of our clients that use Acronis for the cloud backup. And then at the bottom here, it just gives you the list of all the permissions that are required to actually render the report. So you can do kind of a self-check. So you can hit the refresh key and it'll pull the permission and it'll light up with an orange triangle if it's actually not got the permission. So you can go see if there's been something new that's been added and you turn on the blade in here, you can go see if the permission is actually given to the app registration. Then all of this is exportable. So you can export a summary if you needed to give it to somebody. Moving on to login. So in Entra ID, when that's your point of authority for all your user accounts, 99% of our clients, and if you don't have this, I would configure it for you, use log analytics to log every interaction from every user for every login for every application they're accessing. Well, that's a great amount of data, and trying to make sense of that data is really, really difficult. And so we built a Power App for one of our clients years ago. And when I saw the Power App a couple months ago, my immediate thought was, well, this needs to go into Recon because it's pulling the same data. So what this does is it gives you the total number of sign-ins in your environment, and you have these little slide-out blades where you can get all the details, search, and export. So if you're looking for a login for a specific user, if you want to know just who the failed logins are, you can see these and kind of where they're coming from. So you could search for all your Russian, China, Brazil logins that shouldn't be happening. You can search by country, just kind of a quick kick out, and then cities. And the reason I did that was because I found a really big need in my environment to break out these analytics like this to manage us, because we're pretty tight on our conditional access. And I thought we were pretty solid. And we had about 1,000 logins that were failing a day when I stood this up. And I thought that was interesting. I'm like, why do we have so many? I found 2 holes in our conditional access policy that I since have plugged up since some of the technologies changed when we implemented it. The map itself is also interactive, so you can see how many sign-ins came from Russia and filtered down. So you can see all of these are coming from similar IP address schemes. So what I would do in my environment, so I put a conditional access block on this IP, or make sure that the country is blocked altogether just to quiet down the noise that's going into your log analytics workspace. When I first put this together, I dumped it all to a CSV and I made a pivot table because I wanted to see, well, who are my top failed login users? And so instead of doing that, I'm like, why don't I just build that into the app? So I put in top failed logins. So when I did this in our environment, I found that one of our engineers had 90 failed logins every day. And it was because of an app that it was just the wrong password that was trying to authenticate repeatedly every day. And it helped me identify that. But you can click on the person here and you can see what application they're trying to get and where they're coming from, how many attempts they have, the risk levels that are associated with it. So I built in some of the nice features to try to see the data in kind of a different perspective. Then I put some tables that are all exportable to CSV. And when you click on the rows, you get more information of it, right? Things like sign-in locations and recent sign-ins, and then unregistered device sign-ins. So if you're using Intune, you want to have all your devices registered. But that's not always the case when people use a user account from a kiosk, or maybe they're borrowing a laptop or using from a home laptop. And maybe you want to squash that profile because you have no control over that device and what it's accessing. This view gives you that view, that gives you that insight into your environment, so you can filter on who's accessing my network from an unregistered device that I don't want. And if you know that it's okay, they can access Exchange Online, you can remove the specific application from it So you can just now narrow it down to a very specific subset of apps that are being accessed from an unregistered device. Do you guys care about the 80 on-premise stuff? Do you guys have 80 on-premise, or are you guys cloud only?
We have 80.
Okay. So I'll cover this, and I can be as brief or as long-winded as you want. But the way that this works is I created it's probably 1,000-line PowerShell script that is downloadable here. So every time you update it, you can download it. And you run it on a domain controller or a machine that has rights to the domain. And it generates JSON files. And JSON files, if you don't know, are just little text files that are in a schema format, kind of like XML. So it generates 14 different JSON files, and those files get uploaded as part of this process to your Azure storage account. So this doesn't live in my data. And in the backend settings, we point to your Azure storage account and give it a token so that it can render these files. So you could run this 3 or 4 times a day if you thought your domain was having issues. But we look at things like replication health, DNS health. We do a DC diag across all your domain controllers every time it runs. You can see the total number of users you have, and I put some filters in there like how many are enabled, how many are disabled, how many passwords are expired, how many accounts are locked out, how many passwords are set to never expire. A little bit of information about groups, and then servers that are in Active Directory, if you have any of those. One of the big keys to this is setting, which servers do I have? That's great, but which ones are end of life already? Which ones are not supported for patch management? So I expose those right out of the gate. Some of the other blades we look at are like stale users and sysvol DFSR replication. When's the last time they replicated, and are they healthy? Is there anything in the queue? AD recycle bin, your time sync, and then again, your Azure AD Connect. So you can look to make sure that the last time that it connected, it actually connected and synced into Azure so that the information is accurate. Try to be holistic in our approach here. So we grab things like the domain and forest level information. So forest functional level. And then down here, we have a bit of information about the domain controllers. And when you click on a domain controller, you can see the FSMA roles that it holds if it's a global catalog. And then you can see all the tests that it's passed or anything that's failed in the DC diag. So in this case, the system log had some warnings in it in the last 24 hours, so it's going to come up as a warning, right? So are those ignorable? Do you want to squish those? Do you care? That's entirely up to you or whoever's managing your environment. For us, when we take over and manage Active Directory, we take over and manage all facets of Active Directory to ensure that it works the way it should. Down here, we have a couple of blades about Active Directory, so things like replication, DC diag, DNS. We look at zone replications and how many servers have those zones. Group policies, if you still have an abundance of those, I want to know how many links are applied to a group policy, and if it's a user or a computer setting. And if you like the hierarchy view from the Advanced Group Policy Management Console better, I put that in here. So you're like, well, we're going to move all this to Intune one day, but users live in our finance department. So what policies are currently affecting them? Those 3 are inherited. There's nothing linked directly. So then you can take those 3 policies and translate those into Intune policies for those kinds of settings, because they can't be a direct replacement. You want to architect it differently, but you want to know what settings are applied today for the settings for tomorrow. If we go to users, I did a little bit of just kind of some things that you saw earlier. So how many are enabled, how many are disabled? So I could just filter by how many users are disabled, how many have passwords expired, how many accounts are locked out. And so this really helps you just every morning, you can come in, triage some stuff before people get in potentially, or before they call. If you're trying to get to that proactive, say, or as proactive as you can get, how many passwords are set to never expire. And if we just go back to all the accounts are enabled, you have some other filters here that you can add to the mix, or you can search by name, department, email. It's pretty free text. And then you can export that to a CSV, okay? And the CSV that we exports all the rows that we just have, right? And the cool thing is, if you wanted to clean up Active Directory, one of the steps we usually take is we export a whole bunch of user accounts, and then we write a PowerShell script. Well, I went ahead and wrote those PowerShell scripts to disable and delete AD users, and it takes the export as the input for that script. So if you're like, I need to get rid of all my, I don't know, disabled accounts. So you go to the disabled accounts, you see when they were disabled, last logged in, you're like, all right, this 241 days ago, that can go, 120 days ago, that can go, that can go. You export it, you download the disabled PowerShell script, connect to the domain, you run it with the input of the script, And there's like 3 or 4 safety checks that says, hey, you're about to delete these 3 users. Are you sure you want to delete these 3 users? Type confirm to make sure you want to delete these 3 users, and then it'll delete those users that are in the input. Groups, if you're kind of unwinding nested group membership, if you look at a group, you want to know what groups are a member of it. And then if you go to users, I think if we go to properties here on the details, yeah, it'll show the groups that they're a member of down here if they're a member of any group. And just like when you go to the details of the user account in Active Directory or you go to properties, I exposed all the common things that you're probably looking for. So if you're trying to get to Active Directory and today you got a VPN in or connect to an AWS box and then connect to a VPN in, just to look at what OU somebody's in, or when their passwords was last set, or when they last logged in, or how many days it's been since they've logged in, you can just go to this portal, and if you need to export it, you can export it to a CSV per user. Finally, I put in here server inventory. Not a ton of stuff in here, but I did create the disable Active Directory server or delete Active Directory server PowerShell script. So it works the same way. You can filter however you want. So you can look all your end of life support machines, export it, disable it if you wanted to. Probably not going to be used a whole lot unless there's an environment that really needs a lot of cleaning, but it's in there for kind of a nicety. You guys have config man still on-prem or no?
Nope, not anymore.
Okay, so let's go to Entra ID users. So in the users view, when you log into Entra ID, you get a bit of information, but not really useful information. So when I look at Entra ID, I look at it from a security perspective and kind of a Microsoft perspective. And so I look at things like what's the password age, meaning how many people have not changed passwords in a year, which is fine if they have MFA enabled. So I put in here the goals. This is specifically Microsoft guidance every time you see a goal at the bottom. So it's cool. You can bypass changing your password in a year. So in this environment, it's fine as long as they register for MFA. But in this environment, only 62% have MFA registration, which if you do the math, comes out to be about 5 users. That's where our vulnerabilities start, right? So you have a user that hasn't changed their password in a year and don't have MFA. So that's where our 5 accounts need to start from a narrowing down perspective. And then I have things like MFA and conditional access policies that wouldn't be covered. So there's about 6. And then dormant accounts or no sign-ins in 90 days, there's 13. Again, demo environment, right? So it's probably not going to look like your environment would. But those kind of bubble up, those high-risk findings pretty quickly. If we go into users, there's a couple of things or ways we want to slice users. We want to look at total users, enabled, members, guests, and disabled. So I put all those counts here for this. And the goal from Microsoft is try to keep about under 2% or less than 2% disabled because it's a small environment. I'm at 13% disabled with 2 accounts. The reason for that is you want to minimize your attack surface for users that are disabled. If they're disabled, get rid of them when you can, move them to a shared mailbox, convert them, get rid of the actual user account so nobody can enable them if they still have their old permissions. Synced accounts, on-premise accounts, just kind of a split there, what that looks like, your guest account surface area. And then a big thing is how many guest accounts have been created in 30 days, that little number there, right? So how is your tenant configured to allow everybody to connect to invite guests and give permissions to SharePoint or Teams? That's a number you kind of want to keep a track on. Again, how many members versus guests, your MFA registration, and then your account age distribution. So how many accounts have been created in the last 90 days, 90 days to a year, and how many accounts are older than a year? And then how many accounts haven't signed in 90 days, 180 days, or have never signed in? So again, there's some guidance on this, right? So if you want to keep accounts that haven't signed in 90 days to about 5%, and if they haven't signed in, you want to keep 0 of those accounts, right? You want to encourage them to sign in, use their account. If they're not signing in, they don't need it. So if we scroll down, then I give you a way to kind of search, right? So I'll just kind of search for Alex. Alex is one of my test accounts. You get some very basic information here, but if you go to properties, you get the Entra ID properties of that user, including things like what directory role, like this guy's a global admin permanently, which should not happen in an environment. And you get, whatever information you have filled out in Entra in here. And then you get the security groups with a search, so you can look to see what groups they're in, and you get the assigned licenses of that user all in that one view. Now, one of the things in Entra, if you're using Entra and Intune, is they bind themselves to a device. So if you go to Entra and you click on a user's properties, you'll see a devices tab. If you go to the devices tab, it's all the registered devices for that user. I expose the same information. So you can see that laptop A Johnson belongs to Alex Johnson, gives you the operating system model, the last sync date, if it's compliant inside of Intune or not. If you want to go to the details of the Entra and Intune, so it's an aggregation of Entra and Intune data, you get that information like the MDM app ID, the enrollment profile, the last sign in, the last sync, all that kind of stuff. And then what groups is the device a member of? If you want to see Intune software on it, you can click the software button and see what software Intune's picked up, right? All from the user. And that same information is available for devices or from software. You can get the user license device. You can get all that stuff from either one of them. You also have filters here, so you can export the data after you filtered it. Maybe things that people haven't signed in over 90 days, you'd want to create a filter for. Dump that to a CSV, and then you probably guessed I created a PowerShell script to disable Entra users or to delete Entra users. This requires global admin rights of whoever's running the script. Same thing, it can feed the script from the exported data from here. Now, that one's not probably used as much as the devices one is, because every time somebody logs in and authenticates against a device, it logs the device in Entra, okay? And what I found in all of our clients is that there is a large number of devices that have not signed in more than 90 days, almost across the board. So cleaning this up, it would usually take some time, but you can click this box. This environment, of course, doesn't have any. Export the data and then disable the device in Entra so that it's just gone, right? Or disable it first, and then you can delete the ones that are disabled based on the script. So you can see if it's enabled, true or false, managed, true or false. You have all the filters that you would need to have. Typically, when we go into an environment to clean something like this up, we're writing PowerShell scripts to dump this information into a CSV and then writing the PowerShell script to do it. I just did all that legwork ahead of time. So if we scroll up, we'll take a look at devices. The first thing we care about is most people that we manage are Intune managed. So again, it was an internal tool originally. So how many devices are Intune managed in your environment? How many are enabled? How many are disabled? What device activity? How many devices have not been active in 31 to 90 days or over 90 days? Modern join, ownership mix, conditional access policies applied, and then some high-risk findings. So how many are unmanaged and enabled? How many are inactive for over 90 days and enabled? And then who has unknown ownership? Those are 3 risks that I would identify inside of a modern environment. We do the kind of the basic stuff like your OS distribution, how many Windows, how many iOS, how many Android, how many Mac OS do I have? Just kind of looking at it in a bar chart so you can see your percentage of distribution. Then your enrollment methods, are they auto-joined, user-enrolled, window, Azure, AD join only? And then we talked about the table down here below. Just like before, we look at laptop A Johnson, you expand it, you can see the user. You can get to the user details just like we could before. You can get to the device details like we could before, and you can get to the software inventory like we could before. Yeah, Jared, you get a question?
Yeah, so for the enrollment methods or the join statuses,
Mhm.
we have a duplication problem where, let's say we cloud join devices going forward, but we still have a existing amount of devices that are still listed in Active Directory.
Uh-huh.
Am I able to use this to filter for devices that are, let's say, cloud joined only versus joined through AD and then synced up through Entra?
Yeah, so the join type down here is going to be a filter, and the more join types that you have, so all my devices in this are Azure AD joined, whether they're user enrolled or Azure AD joined. None of these are AD registered joined, right? So that would be the difference that you would see in a filter there. I just hide it if it doesn't exist so that there's no false positives or wondering why it's not there. But yeah, you could do it that way. And then if we put in the AD Health Connector on premise, yeah, I didn't actually bring the devices in there yet. So yeah, it would be the oh, that's right. I put the devices in config man. If you go to the devices and Entra, you would filter there to kind of see where they're at. The other thing we can do is for your environment, if you wanted to bring in devices from Active Directory, get all the sign-in information, I would just extend the AD on-premise collector to bring that info in. I had one other request for it, but since it's going in your environment, you're an active client, I would develop that and put that together within a couple days.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because the main thing is we've got people that'll take a previously AD joined computer and then they'll, reset it,
Yep.
cloud join it, but then they don't go into Active Directory and clear the record. So then,
Yeah. So
and
you
then
get
that record still syncs up to Entra. So I look for a device and, it's, I mean, our Entra device list definitely could use some cleanup. So something like that
You're
would be
not-
helpful.
You're not alone, right? I mean, all my clients have just a ton of devices in Entra and they didn't know it because when you pull the view up in Entra, you just see the top, 20, and then you have to click more to get more, and you see another 20 and go down. Like this view is so unusable if you're trying to keep it clean, right?
When
So-
I saw the total number of overall devices, it was an emotional couple of minutes trying to grapple with the number.
Had some tears, did you?
I was like, this number does not line up with my expectations. This is not good.
Yeah, I should probably note that any of these cards, these graphs can be hidden if you don't like them or they don't apply to you. Like if you use Duo for MFA, we have a client that does that. So on the users, we just don't show the MFA card and it's a per user setting. So if you give it to somebody in the environment that really don't need to see it, we can just show them how to manage their own view. And then all of it is exportable into just a PDF that you can look at or give to somebody or provide as a reference point. They're not super pretty reports, but this is written by me. I'm a 26-year engineer, right? So I like the pretty reports, but I'm way more about making the data usable. So, but all of this is exportable. If we go into licensing information, one of the things you can look at portal.azure and you can go to licenses, or you can go to the admin center to look at licenses. And I actually learned through this tool that if you're overcommitted on licensing, it actually doesn't show you the number of available versus number of actually used in the admin center. It actually just puts a little line at the top that says you're overcommitted, and it's kind of hard to see. Because when I pulled this up for one of our or one of our clients, I said, do you know you're overcommitted on your E5 licenses? Like, no, we're not. And I said, you are overcommitted by one. So occasionally, if everybody's using a license and trying to register at once, which probably won't happen, but that race condition in their environment could happen, somebody's not getting a license. And so we went to their portal and sure enough, it said 250 out of 250. But then a little word above that said you're overcommitted by one. And he's like, no kidding. Like they just didn't know, right? So you can click on the license, you can go to details and you can see the users that have the license or you can export it. And if you care about the Microsoft underpinnings of what's in the license, you can see the service plans of it. And I just sorted it by utilization out of the gate. So how many 80% utilized, 66% utilized. So you can see if you're overcommitted, undercommitted, try to save some money on licenses, right? The work usage down here below I found to be completely worthless, so I'm not going to cover that. I tried to find a way to who's using the license, but the data Microsoft gives us is just garbage right now. If you're in Intune, you need a way to look at all the most installed apps, unique publishers, inventoried apps, and then a nice sort. So I think, if I remember right, Chrome is in here. So you can see the version of Chrome, how many installs, and if you expand it, you can get the number of installs. And again, you can get the whole software list for the device, what users bound to the device, and the device information, just like you could from the users or devices list, so you don't have to bounce around to different blades. And however you have this sorted, you can export it and you get the list, right? So if you're like, I need a list of everybody's got Google Chrome, type in Chrome and hit export, right? Far, far easier than trying to do it through Intune. In Intune, we also have config profiles, so things like BitLocker, Secure Boot, Windows Hello, all those settings. How many are non-compliant, compliant devices in error and conflict, and you can see the device list. When you click the details, you can export it, you can search for it, all those things. These filters at the top also have a summary. So if you click on how many devices in your configuration profiles overall have errors, you have one device in Secure Boot, one device in Password Manager's example, and then you can go to the individual policies below to get those actual devices. More of a summary. Compliance works the same way. So compliant, non-compliant, conflict, error, not applicable, and all these little blades are clickable. So you can go to how many are in error. You can see the error and what policy is actually in error for them. If you want to see those, you can export it to a CSV, their last sync, all in a way to help you troubleshoot and get users back to the aligned environment that you want to have them in. We have things like compliance policy deployments, details, so we can click details here and see the non-compliant settings. In this case, it's unknown, so it's very unhelpful, or laptop J. Wilson you'll see as a problem in this environment. So that might be somebody that needs some attention. And then you have compliance policy summary settings. So again, the details of the charts, they're all filterable, sortable, and exportable. Things like minimum OS version, get the device details that don't meet that requirement. All in an attempt just to get to fixing problems faster rather than trying to find the problems and spend 2 hours trying to find them. If you're doing updates through Intune, it's a mixture of Windows Update for Business and log analytics, okay? So the alerts come from log analytics, so you have to pull that info in. The charts and analytics, some of that data lives in log analytics, some of it lives in Windows Update for Business. I did not find a view that I liked in Intune that'll help me look at the whole environment as I go. So you can get all your deployment rings, the settings of the deployment rings, the device information, and what the status is of the individual deployment ring as you go through and click them. And then you get the settings of non-compliant. So again, it's all sortable and exportable and all that kind of stuff if you need it. Do you guys have Intune Analytics? Do you use Endpoint Analytics?
I believe we have it enabled. I'm not sure.
Yep.
I haven't been using it personally.
It's
but
a cool
I'm
feature.
pretty sure it's enabled.
So what this does is it ranks or scores how your endpoints are performing from everything from app reliability to work anywhere to application crashes. So I'll show you as an example. You can see your average boot time in this environment is 16 seconds with a score of 78, which is okay. And you can get your work from anywhere scores. We can look at that if you want. But the real power down here is how many apps are crashing on a regular basis, right? How many apps are hanging on a regular basis? And in this case, you can see Google Chrome seems to be a bit of a problem in this environment. So you have 12 crashes and 5 hangs. You scroll down, you get an endpoint by analytics. So that J. Wilson laptop says a problem, has a really low score on the device score. It's got twice the amount of boot time as anybody else and twice the amount of login time. Latitude 5540. I flagged it as needs attention. Somebody needs to do something with this thing here because Jay Wilson's not having the best experience we can provide for them. If we go down and look at application reliability, you have the apps that you've put in the environment. You have a score with the apps, like Teams has 8 crashes and 4 hangs, needs attention. Chrome has 12 crashes, 5 hangs, needs attention. So if you're looking on a daily basis, like how can I improve my user experience, my productivity, the organization, add value to the organization, this is a great way to instrument all of these applications that you're using, your top 5, top 10, to see if you can make any difference at all in your users' productivity, right? All of it's exportable, some of it's sortable. It's good stuff. If you're using Intune Autopilot, I don't make any settings that are, actually, I had a request, what was it, Steve, earlier this week? Somebody wanted the failed autopilot registration log, so I have that on my backlog to put in here. But we have total devices. Go ahead.
That may be a good segue into if, as they're using it, if they have bug or feature requests, how to do it.
Yeah, so we have a ticketing system that we use internally for all of our managed customers. And so if you want to come in, I don't have it in the demo. Let me go to my lab. So if I go to my lab, which is a real environment, right? And I click on my name down here, I have submit feedback available. So I can either submit a bug that I found in the report that's not lining up with what I see, and you can add a screenshot, or you can submit a new feature request. So if you're like, hey, I'd really like to see this and this and this, and my typical turnaround is 3 to 5 days. But if you need something complex, it might take a little bit longer. But this opens a ticket for the dev team here, and you can see the different settings. So this is a real environment. I actually have 13 unresolved issues from Microsoft. But let me go to my demo environment again and finish this piece of it. So in Autopilot, we basically want to know how many devices in total, how many enrolled, how many are pending, how many profiles are assigned, deployment profiles, because that's our usual troubleshooting steps for them. Deployment profiles, what settings do you have set up? And then your enrollment status page with what settings you have configured. So again, this is still pretty high level, but somebody asked me for the failed logs because they said that that was challenging to find, and I thought that was a great idea. So I'm going to bake that in eventually. And if we take a look at the security blade, I threw a whole bunch of stuff in here, just kind of a high level. Like if I were looking at an environment every day, this is the kind of stuff I'd want to look at just from a big pass. And then if I wanted to dive in something more specific, I would go into that specific service. So I look at things like conditional access policies, how many are enabled. I look at risky users, how many users are at risk in my environment every day. That should be something somebody's looking at every day. What my MFA coverage is, what my security defaults, whether they're enabled in Entra or not, my PIM activations, how many people have activated PIM today in 24 hours. Conditional access policy status, if I see a bunch of them disabled, maybe I need to do some cleanup. Risk level distributions between high, medium, and low, my users, MFA registrations. And then I look at things like my authorization policies. So who's able to invite guests into my tenant? Again, it's just maybe a quarterly check to make sure admins are the only people that can invite guests in the tenant as opposed to users. And then are users allowed to consent to apps? Is it restricted? Is Microsoft PowerShell Online blocked or enabled, right? So those are settings in your tenant that should probably be, in my opinion, locked down. And then how does your cross-tenant access work with B2B collaboration stuff? Default inbound, default outbound, cross-cloud. Your risky users, just some more information about them. And then I don't remember if in my demo, yeah, so my demo, I don't have a lot of good data here. We can look at it in my lab. But we have conditional access policies, and it'll break out all the settings in the policy. So if you just want to look at your conditional access because you're getting blocked by somebody in your logins page, you still don't need to PIM. You can just go try to find the information here. If you have security baselines enabled, what they're set to, and then if you have Defender for endpoint configured, how many devices, signatures, and threats. Again, we're not trying to boil the ocean. We're just trying to get a high level picture of the environment and what we're looking at to know if I need to dive in deeper. All right, so let's go to my lab environment where I have different things configured. So we left off, let's go to the log setting. So back in log analytics, right? So if you remember the conversation where all those logins happened, in a Entra environment, you're logging everything to log analytics. But one of the challenges I've learned over the years is nobody knows KQL. And KQL is the language to extract data from log analytics. But this contains all of the information like who's using legacy authentication, who's logging in without MFA, how many brute force detections are targeting your environment, how many password changes and resets have there been, how many accounts that are stale have had activity, how many people have logged in with impossible travels, risky sign-ins, things like mail forwarding rules, privileged role assignments. All of this data lives in that, right? And so instead of trying to teach the world KQL, I pre-populated it. So if I said users without MFA, here's what the KQL looks like, and it's all editable. So if you're like, I don't care about 14 days, I really need 7. So now you can start learning KQL because it's all baked in, and you hit run. And this is a real environment. So it pulled from my log analytics right now on the fly. None of this is stored. And it looks like Benjamin Ra used one Outlook Web twice in 7 days. And my admin account used the Azure portal twice in that same 7 days, right? So now you can get all of that information from a security profile view without having to PIM up, go to log analytics, get right to the workspace, open the table and go, well, I don't know what to type. Because that's what I find myself doing until I wrote all of these KQL queries for everybody. Another thing I wanted to show was Entra ID app registrations. So if we go in here, this is again from my lab environment. Like I said, no judging. There's a lot of expired app registrations, but there's probably one for Recon because this app is in this environment, right? And you can see I had a Recon Graph API that's expired. That's probably my old app. And my ReconAI app right here, if I click on it, I see all the permissions that this app has in my Entra environment. And then I get, when does it expire, right? So now you're proactively trying to manage that experience for those users. Things like, I don't know, Salesforce or apps that used your accounts to log in from CRB will likely have an app registration that has either a certificate or it has a secret. And what I do is I expose how many expiring secrets in the next 30 days. My lab doesn't have any. How many expired secrets do you have? So if something is broken, maybe nobody's complained yet, you can go clean this up or look at it and go, oh, you know what? Our SCCM to manage our Wi-Fi stuff, that expired April 5th of 2026. It's only April 10th. I probably need to go fix that before anybody complains or the app tries to renew. And then how many expiring certs do you have in that same environment? What I've learned is a lot of people do is they create a calendar invite for themselves, whoever created the app registration, of when it's going to expire. But if those people leave or they ignore the calendar invite, things just break and you get tickets, right? If you care about Azure resources and spend, I threw a blade in here so that you get your current cost month to day against a lab environment, so it's pretty tiny. How many resources, resource groups, and all of these are filters. So again, this is not stored information, it's pulling from APIs real time. And then what your projected monthly cost is, because if you go to Azure, you can see what your projected cost is. And then when I bring in all the resources, I sort by what's your current most expensive resource. So I have the UEM Desktop Analytics, which is an old version of this report that was written in Power BI. I could probably get rid of that. That saved me $4 this month so far, right? So you can start reclaiming some of those costs. Now, if you, again, because you guys have AWS, I would love to explore getting all that data from AWS in this portal as well. I think that'd be a cool adventure. And then onto I'll cover SOPs briefly because we got just a few minutes here. So SOPs, if you have monthly checks or weekly checks that you want to do, we put some templates in here just as an example. So in this case, Acronis, you can add a weekly, monthly task. You can come in here to your task and you can say, I don't have any weekly. Do I have any? I don't know if I have any in this environment at all. But if you had them set up, you could check the box, set who actually did the check so that you could ensure your environment's being managed. That was an ask from a customer that we put together for them that they're using. But let's go to the AI stuff. So all of this stuff is really, really cool, but you're still going to look at a report, filtering the data, you have to know some semblance of what you're looking for still, right? The goal with the AI chat assistant is I baked in things like, what if you didn't know that KQL had the users without MFA? I put a quick prompt in here. I want the top 10 users that haven't registered MFA in my environment, right? So now what this is doing is it reaches out to an LLM that's built in your Azure AI Foundry, not mine. So your tenant is configured with an AI component that lives in your tenant that doesn't back train any of that data. And what happens is when you reach out to the LLM sees, like in this case, this is running GPT-4.1 Mini from Azure. It'll see that there's a tool embedded in this application. And I actually exposed the tool that I wrote so that you can see the data that's being pumped to it. And it's going to take the data from the tool and answer it like an LLM would, or a ChatGPT or an AI agent would. So I'm asking how many users, oh no. What happened? Steve, my demo.
Yeah, don't troubleshoot it now.
All right. That's the first time in months that that's ever failed. I'm not sure what happened there. Essentially, this data can all be queried. Let's try it again just to see. It reaches into the tools, and there's like 15 tools that you can see your entire data state. So if you have Active Directory on premise, and one of my demos I usually go through, oh, there it is.
There we go.
So it looks at this tool when I asked it for users without MFA. It's a tool I wrote called Get Users, and it's got some arguments with it. And then it gives me the data that was provided to it. So this data is just an XML JSON schema that you can see the data that was given to it, and it answered it like this in a chart, right? So if I wanted to say, in this environment, I have MECM. It's a config man local. So if I said, what version of SQL is MECM running? It's going to query the tool for MECM data, and it's going to tell me what version of SQL it's running. It's running CU25, SQL Server 2019 standard is the operating system. It's actually SQL Server 17, CU25 is what I'm running. And then because it's an LLM, I can say, is CU25 for SQL 2017 the latest CU? And then I can say, if not, what is the latest CU for SQL. Oops. 2017. Steve, if you're talking, because I know you are, you're muted.
I want to make sure we have time for configuration questions also.
Okay. So that's probably enough of the demo, but I bring everything from secure score to non-compliant devices to disabled users with licenses, which is a hard thing to find in an environment, legacy authentication temps, top failed logins in the last 24 hours, top Azure costs month to date. And all that information is ran by the LLM, gathered by tools living in your Azure tenant. So I'll kind of finish it there.
Awesome.
And if you can,
Dive
ahead.
in.
you may want to go to the configuration panel and walk them through that on what they need to do to get their client secret and tenant ID put in.
Yeah, so if I go to my lab environment, so the way that this all works is I created an Entra Recon App ID script. So you can download this PowerShell, run it with a global admin and a subscription admin, and it configures all the permissions for you and writes the app registration. If you want to know the guide, you can click to view the guide here of how to run the script, the prerequisites, what the app registration looks like, the permissions that it grants to itself, right? And then if you're doing the Azure subscription, here's an additional permission that I don't have in the script that you need to add, RBAC role, and here's how you get there to add it. Log analytics to add that data, that is in the script today. The on-premise data collection, how to actually get these storage accounts configured step by step, and a quick reference checklist for it all. So back to the configuration, we need an Azure tenant ID, Azure client ID, the secret. Notice it's blanked out so we can't read it. Are you a cloud, government high, government low? And then what components do you want on? Do you want Intune? Do you want endpoint analytics, Windows Autopilot applications, logins, SharePoint, OneDrive data, Azure resource costs, standard operating procedures? This is a new thing I'm developing, which we'll talk about that when the time is right. Log analytics data, on-premise data collections. Here's your URLs to store those JSON files. And then all the reports, do you want on or off? If you're a customer of ours, we do the Halo integration so that you can go to the quarterly business review. You can see how many hours you've used, how many hours we've not used for the month, what tickets we're opening. And then if you have the AI features enabled, scroll. So this is how it works, right? So in Azure AI Foundry, you create an endpoint. So I created one called Azure ReconAI resource.cognitiveservices.azure.com. I got an API key. I gave it the model that I deployed, the 4.1 mini, the name of the model, and the API version, and that's what's answering all my chats for me. So that cost would be a cost to you. It would be a configuration in your tenant, but that keeps all of your data completely in your tenant.
Questions? You left them gobsmacked, Jason.
Or, okay, so
I don't know what that
For-
word means.
accessing the portal, like accessing this, I assume I'm probably gonna be the one to set this up.
Yep.
I assume we have our own version of this portal or we have a login for it.
Yeah, so you'll get a login, so I'll sign back out. And it lives in my tenant, the portal is, so it's basically, I develop against it, I push the code to GitHub, GitHub pushes it to my Azure static web application. It's called a CI/CD pipeline, continuous improvement, continuous deployment. So rather than have multiple apps out there, I have one app and all the configuration lives here, all your data lives with you, okay? And so if I go, the way to get to it is reconai.model-check. Oh, I thought I logged out. And you log in, but you log in with your Azure credentials. It's Azure to Azure. So if you have MFA, when you hit login, it's going to ask you for your MFA, right?
Okay.
And then in every account, so if I go to my...
Yeah, and I think I put all the users in, so I think Jared has already got an account.
Got it.
Let's
What
see.
address is that? Is that under Jared.belts or?
Yeah, if Gee,
Yeah,
there we go.
if you go to reconai.model-technology.com, whatever your email is for CRB, once you log in, your unknown user gets bound to your credentials. And so you guys all should have logins to this already. Now, nothing's configured, so you're going to have a blank dashboard. But as soon as you get your app ID, tenant ID, which that script generates all that information for you at the end, so you can just plug it in and go. What I have noticed is I do allow configuration from clients to try to configure their own stuff. There's a couple pieces that I'm still kind of debugging. But if you log in and you click on your name down here, you can go to the whatever your tenant name is, so CRB lab settings. So yours will be CRB settings, and that's where you see your tenant ID, client secret, all that stuff. So as you start populating that and go to the dashboard components, they should light up. And if you are stuck, you can go to the overview tab, run a permissions check, and see what permissions you're missing.
Okay.
Link is in chat.
The cool takeaways I took from today is at some point I'd like to develop against your AWS environment to bring whatever data you want in there into this, because I think it could be bigger for you guys than just M365 since you're kind of dual homed in some regard. And then was that my only note that I took away, Steve? Do you remember?
Yep, that was the big one. Oh, and was there something around Active Directory?
Oh, the devices.
Yeah. Mhm.
See if we can get a better way to cleanse their Active Directory to ensure that what they're disabling is correct.
I think the other one might be user filtering. I've found an increased need to acquire lists of users based off of certain attributes, especially custom extensions. We've
In
been
Active Directory.
And Active Directory to Entra. So most of the stuff is Entra based, but we're syncing up from AD.
Yeah, that would be interesting. It's been a while since I've played in custom attributes or custom extension attributes, but I'm gonna write that down. And then once we get your portal configured, I would love to, Jared, probably spend some time with you just to see what things would make it more usable after you spend some time in it, and then I can make a bunch of changes for you.
Yeah.
Jason, looks
I
like
can
Ryan's
already
having
see a
trouble
big
with
value add.
authentication.
Ryan is?
In chat, it looks like he's getting some kind of authentication error or issue. And very well, we still
Yeah,
got a minute.
It's not allowing me to back out of your account for whatever reason. Let me try going in through private.
Let's see. An
Oh,
approval
wait.
is
Oh,
required.
Is that
Now
for,
hang on. Now it might be allowing that. Let me see.
why is it logged in as Steve Bowman?
Oh, try the other link. I think you're trying the first link that I deleted. Try the second link that I put in chat, the ReconAI login.
Yeah, so that new one's.
Yeah, it says approval required.
Yep. So it's just consenting that it can read your tenant to verify that it can authenticate you.
I'll say because Jason said.
Jason told me to do this. That's Jason Rutherford. Yeah.
All right, that request is sent in.
So if your tenant is set up to where you guys cannot consent to apps, an admin will have to go consent. So somebody will have to PIM up to consent to that,
Yeah,
to allow that to.
now.
I have the admin. He's on the call.
Jared's like, dang it, just got busy.
And Jared, I think I interrupted you. Was there anything else?
Oh, I just want to say, just immediately looking at this, I think there's a big value add. Having access to this, I think it was interesting. It was one of those things where Ryan just like brought this up of like, oh yeah, we're going to look at this. And I'm like, oh, cool. Because
Yay.
there was part of me that was like, in the last few months already looking at possibly trying to script out some stuff to like create views and that's what I'm doing right now. Like we're doing a lot of like I was referencing the custom attributes. We're doing a lot of security groups based off of those attributes to try to define work roles, for access stuff.
Yeah.
And right now I have to basically manually script pull a bunch of people by those attributes and then put it in a spreadsheet that formats a certain way.
Yeah, so that
There's a
sounds
lot
like that
of
would be
ways I have to do that a lot.
that sounds like that would be a lot of help for you if we got the extension attributes in the search for the users.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad we were able to get this accomplished. I'll send a link to the recording so you can review it. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions as you're going through install and configuration, or if you see additional opportunities for bugs or enhancements.
Awesome.
Will do.
And I'll
Appreciate
get
it.
that admin consent done shortly. I
Cool.
always forget where it is, and then I have to like remember how to find it.
You know what's funny? I do too. And when people ask me, I'm like, oh, I really need to look that up and keep it on a sticky note on my monitor because the admin consent is it's in Entra somewhere.
Portal hopping.
Portal hopping.
Just
Oh,
ask
here.
ReconAI Assistant.
There you go.
It'll probably tell you. Once the AI is configured, yeah, it's now on.
All right, I just granted the permission.
Cool.
And then this all ties through an enterprise app, right? Or an app registration.
App registration, right? So
Okay,
once you
'cause
have the
I would
app,
love to control permissions as well, so only certain accounts can log in.
sure. Now the app registration. So in this case, the only account that's ever logging in is the app to pull that data. The account specifically on who can log into Recon is controlled in the Recon users table. So I don't currently expose that to anybody else other than our admins. So if
Okay.
you needed to add somebody or remove somebody, it's got to go through us just to make sure, because I'm not interested in having anybody like add a bunch of accounts and then not remediate or clean them, right? So anytime we get asked to add accounts, I'm like, is there any accounts we can remove just to make sure it's clean from the data perspective?
Perfect. Got it. So someone, Joe Schmo goes and tries to log in, but he's not added. He's just gonna get like an error message.
He'll if they authenticate through an Azure account to tenant, they authenticate to Recon, it shows nothing, right?
Okay.
Yep. But they need to have an Azure account, number one. And number two, they need to have permissions into a client table. And we did have this third-party pen test, and I gave them an admin account in my demo client that said, find all my other clients. I want you to exfiltrate data. And these guys do it for like the big companies that do it. And they said they couldn't get anywhere. So I think the security in this is pretty solid.
Sweet.